Chosen one. Lean in. This moment is not ordinary time. It is a window. You have walked through rooms where your light felt dimmed and your name felt small, where the weight of being misunderstood pressed down on your shoulders until even your reflection looked tired. You told yourself it was normal to fade, that exhaustion was your new identity, that perhaps you were meant to blend into the background and be grateful for scraps of peace. But heaven has stepped into your timeline to contradict that lie. This is not a lullaby. This is a trumpet, not a pat on the shoulder, a summons. And the message is precise. You were crowned long before you were criticized, chosen long before you were overlooked, numbered in love, down to the very hairs on your head. Today we will talk about something the world has turned into surface. Your hair. Yet heaven has kept as sacred. Not fashion, not trend, not vanity. Mantle. Your hair is a living sign of origin and authority, a visible echo of an invisible anointing. Think of David's head under Samuel's oil, of prophets lifted by a lock, of Jesus declaring that even the hairs upon your head are counted with care. You have called it appearance. Heaven calls it assignment. Your crown has been absorbing more than you knew. Words spoken over you, rooms you passed through, the quiet battles you fought with no applause. And somewhere along the way, while the warfare stayed silent, your sense of being chosen began to erode. You started treating what God set apart as if it were optional. You began wearing a crown like it was just another accessory. But the atmosphere has changed. In the courts of heaven, intercession has been raised on your behalf, and what felt like delay is about to be revealed as strategy. The enemy's most effective attack was never to destroy you loudly. It was to convince you softly that nothing holy rested on your head. If he could make you dismiss your crown, he could make you neglect your calling. If he could dull the top, the rest of your life would lose alignment. And yet, here you are, standing at a doorway God has opened, hearing a voice you cannot ignore. This is not about hair care. It is about soul care. Not about appearance, about agreement. Will you continue to walk as though you are ordinary? Or will you rise into the identity heaven has already declared? As we begin this journey, exposing the subtle siege over your crown, remembering the legacy braided into your strands, restoring what neglect and shame eroded, and activating a holy protocol for alignment, I want you to mark this minute with a simple act of agreement. If something in your spirit is resonating, if you can feel the gentle heat of recognition in your chest, then do more than listen. Step in. Subscribe now and turn on notifications as your first public declaration. I accept the summons. I will not treat my crown casually. I will walk in what heaven is awakening in me. Let that click be your yes to training, your yes to clarity, your yes to a new way of carrying what rests on your head and what flows from your life. Breathe. Lift your chin, not in pride, but in purpose. The same God who numbered your hairs is aligning your steps. By the time we reach the closing prayer, chains will snap, residue will lift, and your inner vision will steady. This is a Kairos hour, and your crown is calling. Now, come with me. We begin by unveiling the invisible siege that targeted your head so your heart would forget who you are. Before battles roar, they whisper. The siege over your identity did not begin with a blow. It began with a suggestion, a glance that shrank you, a joke that seemed harmless but lodged itself in your chest, a compliment that was really a comparison, a room that smiled with its mouth and envied with its eyes. Over time, these quiet strikes formed a net around your head, and without alarms or headlines, your crown started carrying a weight you could not name. You told yourself you were simply tired. You said life was busy, seasons are hard, everyone feels like this sometimes. But heaven saw the pattern. The enemy was not after your hairstyle or your confidence in a mirror. He was after the symbolism of your head. Origin, authority, alignment. If he could dull the crown, he could bend the posture. If he could fog the top, he could confuse the steps. That is why the warfare came wrapped in ordinary days and familiar voices. Not to frighten you away, but to numb you until you forgot that something holy rests there. Think back to the moments you left a space and felt strangely smaller, even when nothing bad had happened. The conversation was civil. The event was nice. The people were polite. Yet you walked away dimmer. That is residue. Your crown is not a decoration, it is a gate. What touches the gate tries to write on the city. Words carry assignments, and some of them try to settle on you like dust. Quiet criticism disguised as advice, subtle contempt under courtesy, the faint drip of someone else's insecurity. It layered itself over your head until your inner brightness looked to you like presumption. You began to apologize for taking up space. You began to lower your voice so others could stay loud in their illusions. You began to manage your own glory to make the room comfortable. You called it humility. Heaven called it theft. Scripture has always placed holy emphasis on the head. Oil runs from the head down, blessing begins at the top and instructs everything beneath it. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, Romans says. Not because the rest of you is unimportant, but because the head governs the flow. If the top is clouded, the body staggers. If the crown is neglected, calling is negotiated. The enemy understands this order far better than we like to admit. He did not need to break your legs if he could bend your neck. He did not need to chain your hands if he could convince your head that God's favor over you was embarrassing. He did not need to shut your mouth if he could persuade you that your voice was too much, that your convictions were intense, that your light made you hard to love. Under the pressure of those subtle narratives, you learn to dim as a survival skill. But survival is not your assignment. Stewardship is. There were other strategies, quieter still. Distraction that masqueraded as rest. Entertainment that numbed but never nourished. Busyness that felt like importance while it eroded intimacy. These did not look like attacks. They looked like options. Yet, day by day, they siphoned oil. You woke up foggy even after sleep, not because you were lazy, but because your crown had been absorbing blows you could not see. You sensed atmospheres more than most, and without knowing why, your head carried the taste of rooms you should have left sooner, conversations you should never have been invited to, agreements you never signed but slowly lived like vows. None of this made you unclean, it made you heavy, and heaviness, when worn long enough, starts to sound like your own voice. Heaven is not shaming you for this. It is revealing the map. The invisible siege wanted you to reinterpret your anointing as inconvenience. It wanted you to call your discernment overthinking, your passion drama, your calling phase. It wanted you to see your hair, heaven's visible sign of a set-apart head, as nothing more than maintenance, something to fix only when it becomes noticeable. But God is retuning you. When he numbers hairs, it is not poetry, it is ownership. When he crowns, it is not metaphor, it is mandate. Your head is where covenant rests, where oil begins, where lies are either welcomed or refused. That is why the Spirit keeps returning to this point. Protect the gate, and you protect the city. So what now? Do not rush to strategies that begin at the bottom. Do not promise yourself a new schedule while your crown stays uncovered. Begin where the siege began, at the head. Speak life where mockery wrote its graffiti. Break agreement with the subtle sentences you adopted as personality. Lift your chin to the level of your assignment, not the comfort of the room. When you step into environments, ask the Holy Spirit for his verdict before you accept the room's narrative about you. When words are offered, discern whether they carry oil or residue, and choose which will be allowed to rest on your head. This is not pride. This is priesthood. You are not late, beloved. You are early to the truth. The net that felt like you is not you. It is shedding. The heaviness that called itself normal is not your portion. It is lifting. The siege did not expose your weakness. It exposed your value. The enemy never counterfeits what heaven has not already crowned. In the next movement, we will step deeper into the mystery your heart already knows. Why your strands remember, how legacy lives in what grows from your head, and how God uses that memory to restore what war tried to erase. There is a reason your head is the place heaven points to when it speaks of remembrance. The scriptures do not casually mention hair. They place it at the intersection of identity and consecration. When Samuel poured oil on David, it did not land on a random surface. It flowed over hair and scalp, saturating a crown before it ever touched garments. That moment did more than choose a king, it marked a memory. Oil teaches matter to remember what God has said. And your crown has been learning that language since before you had words for any of this. Think of how often life has tried to rename you through shame, comparison, and delay. And yet something in you would not forget. You could not explain why certain promises clung to you when logic told you to let go. Why certain prayers felt older than your own voice. Why certain burdens felt inherited rather than invented. Your strands have stood under blessing and weathered curses. They have been present in rooms where heaven whispered, and in rooms where darkness tried to smother the whisper. They carry a testimony, not that the battles were easy, but that the covenant outlived every attempt to mute it. When Jesus says the very hairs of your head are numbered, he is not offering poetic comfort to anxious minds. He is announcing ownership and intimacy. Numbering is what a craftsman does with what he will not lose. Numbering is what a shepherd does with what he calls by name. You have walked through seasons where you felt miscounted by people. Too much for one room, too little for another. Yet the one who counts you rightly has never once mistaken your value. In the quiet, when you laid your head down and wondered whether God still remembered what he promised, the answer was woven into you. Remembrance resting on remembrance. Even Ezekiel's strange vision, lifted by a lock, tells a truth your spirit recognizes. Heaven can seize a man by his crown to show him what his eyes could not see from the ground. Your head is not the place of accident. It is the handle heaven takes hold of when it wants to move your perspective. Legacy lives here as well. Not the weight of generational shame as a sentence, but the echo of generational prayers as provision. Somewhere in your family line, someone who never met you asked God for a future they would not live to see. Their tears salted the soil you now stand on. Their worship built a doorway through which your calling would walk. And while the enemy tried to thread counterwords through that same line, mockery, smallness, self-hatred, the mercy of God braided a stronger strand. It is why certain verses grip you as if you had always known them. It is why certain injustices break your heart as if you had been there when they happened. It is why certain doors feel familiar the first time they open. Your crown is not only personal, it is historical. Heaven has been writing long before you held the pen. This is why neglect distorts so quickly. When you treat your crown as decoration, you train your soul to treat your covenant as optional. When you speak death over what rests on your head, it's ugly, unruly, never enough. You rehearse a script the enemy wrote to make you forget. And yet even then, the numbering remains. The memory waits. One whisper of agreement can begin to clear years of residue, because the truth is older than the lie. You do not have to manufacture a new identity. You have to recover a named one. The Spirit is not asking you to worship your hair, He's asking you to honor what it signifies. Consecration is not vanity. It is reverence. It is the decision to treat the top as holy so the rest of your life can align under it. So place your hand lightly over your head, even now as you read, and notice the tenderness heaven has for you. Let your mind return to moments when you should have been erased, but were not. When you should have been forgotten, but were strangely remembered. When a word over your life refused to die. That was not your stubbornness alone. That was covenant memory at work. From this day forward, let your crown hear a different language. Bless what God has blessed. Guard what God has guarded. Remember what God remembers. And if something in this is burning like truth in your chest, seal it with a small act of agreement that speaks both to heaven and to your own heart. Go to the comments and write just one word: crowned. Not as a slogan, but as a vow. By writing crowned, you are declaring, I will not forget who I am. I will not treat my covenant as costume. I choose remembrance over residue. Let that word stand like oil on the page, a visible echo of the mark you already carry. There is a reason the top is first to feel the weather. Long before thunder announces itself, a shift moves across the air and your skin knows. Likewise, long before a room declares its intentions, your crown knows. What grows from your head is not ornamental alone. It is functional in a way your spirit has always sensed. In the unseen, your hair operates like a shield, soft to the eye, yet strong in purpose, catching what should not pierce you, diffusing what should not dwell, filtering atmospheres so your heart can stay steady. That is why certain days felt heavy for no obvious reason, why you woke from simple errands feeling strangely dulled, why your thoughts lost clarity after sitting beneath laughter that carried poison. Your crown had been standing in the doorway, absorbing more than your mind could measure, guarding you while you called it just a mood. The world laughed and named it vanity. Heaven watched and named it vigilance. But your crown is not only defense, it is reception. Just as a ship lifts a mast to read winds and signals, your spirit lifts through what rests on your head to receive direction. Think of the moments you knew to leave before words turned sharp, or felt peace bloom the instant a quiet, faithful soul walked into the room. Think of the days when prayer felt like a breeze moving across the top of you, small and sure. And you realized that guidance need not shout to be obeyed. The person without the Spirit cannot accept these things because they are spiritually discerned, and yet you have been discerning them for years without a manual. You called it intuition, hunch, gut. Heaven calls it tuning. When your crown is honored, you hear more clearly. When you curse it, you introduce static. When you neglect it, interference multiplies, and what used to be obvious becomes complicated. This is not superstition. It is stewardship. Sensitivity is not your enemy. It is your navigation. The enemy understood this, which is why his most effective assaults never looked like war. They looked like hurry, like clutter, like 1,000 low-signal inputs that never quite become silence and never quite become song. He did not have to sever your reception. He only had to crowd it, to keep your head under a hum of residue so subtle you would call it normal. Under that fog, you misread safe people as distant and welcomed charming predators as friends. Under that fog, you pushed open doors that were closed for your protection and doubted doors flung wide by favor. Under that fog, opportunities felt indistinguishable from distractions, because the voice that once guided you with a nod had to compete with noise. And noise does not need to be loud, to be lethal. It only needs to be constant. God is not calling you to obsession. He is calling you to order. Shields are maintained, not worshipped. Antennas are tuned, not idolized. Begin to treat the top as the first place alignment shows. When you wake and your mind feels crowded before your feet touch the floor, do not immediately fight the day at ground level. Place a hand over your head and remember whose you are. Speak life over the gate before you try to manage the city. Honor your crown with words that agree with heaven, not because flattery changes God, but because truth changes atmospheres. Notice which rooms brighten your eyes and which rooms glaze them. Notice which conversations clear your forehead and which crease it. Notice which screens leave you blinking as if you stared into smoke. These micro-signals are not drama. They are data. Let them teach you where to linger and where to limit, when to pour and when to part. There is a humility in this that the world does not understand. To walk as one whose head is consecrated is not to move in arrogance. It is to carry quiet boundaries like a halo you do not need to explain. You will decline invitations that others chase, not because you are superior, but because you have learned the cost of fog. You will linger in small, unglamorous spaces that make your soul bright, not because you lack ambition, but because you trust that oil finds heads prepared to receive it. You will stop apologizing for sensitivity as if it were a flaw, and start stewarding it as if it were a flame. And as you do, you will find that the shield grows responsive again and the antenna sings. Discernment will return not as anxiety, but as ease, not as suspicion, but as sight. The same God who numbers hairs will number your steps, and the wind you feel across your crown will again become guidance, moving you with the gentleness of a hand that has always known the weight you carry. If you have ever wondered why, after even small acts of reverence, your clarity returns so quickly, why a whispered prayer over your head settles storms faster than an hour of frantic planning, it is because order at the top realigns what flows beneath. Oil still runs from head to hem. Blessing still begins at the crown and instructs the body to follow. You do not need 100 new strategies. You need a faithful beginning. Guard the shield, tune the signal. Let the head agree with heaven, and the rest will learn the sound. Restoration does not begin in the mirror. It begins in the sanctuary. What heaven is calling you to do with your crown is not a trend shift or a new routine. It is a return to holy order. When priests were set apart, oil touched their heads before it touched their hands, because what rests at the top instructs everything beneath it. This is why attempts to fix your life from the bottom up have felt exhausting. Your schedule improved, but your spirit stayed crowded. Your plans multiplied, but your peace remained thin. Restoration moves in the opposite direction. It begins at the head with consecration, and then it flows. You are not being asked to obsess over appearance. You are being invited to re-enter covenant. The language is simple. What sits on my head is not common. I will not speak death over what heaven counts strand by strand. I will not mock what God has marked. I will treat the top as an altar and my daily care as worship, because oil still runs from head to hem, and blessing still obeys gravity. Start where breath is close and words are few. Place your hand lightly over your crown in the quiet of morning before the day makes its claims on you, and acknowledge ownership aloud. You do not need eloquence to sound like heaven. You need agreement. Tell the truth to the air that surrounds you. This crown is sacred, and I will carry it with strength. Watch how swiftly the atmosphere shifts when your mouth stops rehearsing old graffiti and begins releasing order. The heaviness that used to feel welded to you will begin to behave like fog, real enough to notice, but unable to resist the sun. As peace settles, invite God to cleanse the residue your shield has caught in rooms you did not know how to leave, and conversations you lingered in out of politeness. Do not argue with shame. It always wants more words. Lift your head instead. Shame cannot fasten itself to a posture that has learned to look where help comes from. Alignment is not loud, it is steady. There will be moments in this return where your reflex is to overcorrect, where zeal masquerades as harshness, where vigilance tries to become vanity. You will be tempted to turn consecration into performance, to make your crown the subject when it was always the sign. Resist that drift. Consecration is not an aesthetic. It is a yes. It will not ask you to police every strand. It will teach you to keep your gate clean. As you tend to your hair, let gratitude replace criticism. As you prepare to step into demanding spaces, let prayer replace hurry. As you notice fatigue pooling at the top of you, let stillness replace scrolling. You are not pampering yourself. You are preserving signal. You are not idolizing matter. You are honoring a mantle. This tone, soft and resolute, will protect you from the extremes that steal oil. Apathy that lets everything in, and anxiety that tries to control what only trust can hold. You will begin to notice that rooms meet you differently when your head is in order. Favor recognizes a crowned posture. Confusion loses interest in a guarded gate. Conversations that once tangled you will slide off like rain from sealed stone. People who fed on your brightness without blessing it will find less to grasp because you are no longer available to atmospheres that demand your glow, but despise your glory. Do not make speeches about this change. Let your peace deliver the announcement. Heaven endorses what it anoints, and endorsements from above have a way of settling disputes below without a single argument. When accusation tries to resurrect an old name, keep your gaze level and your responses brief. Oil does not explain itself. It simply smells like something that has been near God. If you falter, do not dramatize the stumble. Return to the head. The kindness of God is most clearly felt in the place He first marked you, and He has not withdrawn His numbering because you had a weary week. The flow resumes where you agree again. There is a reason Psalm 133 speaks of oil running down the beard and onto the garment's edge. Restoration is patient and comprehensive. It touches speech, then reach. First what you say, then what you handle. As your crown stabilizes, your voice will gain weight without volume, and your work will carry presence without strain. Doors that ignored you will begin to notice not your effort, but your aroma. This is how consecration over cosmetics moves, quietly, insistently, from head to hem, until your life looks like what your head has been saying all along. Do not rush past the simplicity of this protocol, because it does not impress your ambition. The highest things are often the most ordinary repeated in faith. A hand to the head before the day begins. A blessing spoken where complaint used to live. A refusal to rent your gate to atmospheres that cannot afford the rent. A gentle covering when you sense hostility in the air, not in fear, but in wisdom. A practiced stillness when guidance brushes the top of you like a breeze. These little obediences are not small. They are structural. Keep them and watch everything beneath your head reorganize around a center that finally holds. You are not trying to become someone new. You are letting the person heaven crowned step forward without apology. And as your crown learns the sound of your yes, your steps will find roads that were invisible until you agreed to treat the top as holy. Order is not decoration, it is direction. In heaven's pattern, flow follows alignment the way rivers follow gravity. From the highest point downward, from source to soil, from crown to calling. This is why Scripture pictures oil moving from the head, along the beard, to the very hem of the garment. Because blessing is not a random mist, it is a guided stream. When the top is clear, the rest learns where to go. When the crown is consecrated, your thoughts begin to sort themselves. Your speech gains integrity. Your hands find assignments that fit your grace, and your feet rediscover paths of peace. You have tried to manufacture this flow by force. More effort, more plans, more noise. But force cannot replace order. What you wrestled for at ground level begins to arrive without strain when the head agrees with heaven. It is not magic, it is law. The same God who numbers hairs also orders steps, and the distance between those two graces is shortened whenever you honor the gate that governs both. Watch how subtly the reordering begins. First in your inner weather. The fog lifts, the heaviness thins, an old confusion loses its teeth. Then in your language. You stop apologizing for light and start speaking from it. Your words, once hurried by anxiety, become slow with authority. You notice that gossip no longer tastes sweet and self-defense no longer feels necessary. Oil on the head quiets arguments in the mouth. From there, the flow touches your reach. Projects you abandoned out of fatigue begin to draw near with fresh timing. Relationships that bruised you fall to the edges without drama, while covenant friendships slip into place, like joints finding their sockets. This is alignment at work, not the universe bending to your will, but your will bending to the will of the one who crowned you, and everything entrusted to you responding to that bow. Provision too responds to order. What was blocked often was not withheld so much as misaligned. Heaven does not fund confusion indefinitely. It funds assignment. When the crown is treated as holy, you stop calling every opportunity yours and begin to recognize your portion. You sow into ground that mirrors your consecration, and notice that fruit appears where you planted obedience, not where you planted panic. The yes that once cost you sleep now becomes precise, smaller in number, heavier in glory. You learn to bless closed doors as much as open ones, because both are evidence of a hand you trust. Your calendar starts to look like your calling. Your money starts to follow your mission. Your energy starts to match your season. This is not positivity. It is stewardship under oil. And there is healing in the flow. Many of the aches you carried were not permanent conditions. They were symptoms of a life living against its own pattern. Headache, heartache, soul ache. Each softened when the head stopped hosting lies. As the crown settled under blessing, cycles that felt immovable began to loosen. The late-night spirals of self-accusation, the noon-hour numbness that never made sense, the weekly dread you couldn't explain. Alignment does not promise a life without battles. It promises a posture that wins them. You will still walk through rooms that test your discernment, but you will not leave those rooms wearing their residue. You will still meet voices that question your authority, but you will answer them with presence instead of performance. And when old patterns knock, shame, hurry, comparison, you will feel the oil on your head answer before you do. Do not be surprised when recognition follows. Favor is not a spotlight, it is a scent. People may not know what changed, only that something about you feels settled, clear, and clean. They will describe it badly. New look, new vibe, glow. And you will smile because you know there is nothing new about it. This is the original you stepping forward at last, the you heaven named before the world handed you scripts. Carry it gently. Let your silence do more than your explanations. Let your boundaries preach sermons your lips do not need to deliver. Let your pace, unrushed, unafraid, unwavering, teach anyone watching that flow has replaced frenzy. If you want a picture to hold on to, keep Psalm 133 near. Oil descending, dew settling, life commanded. That is what alignment sounds like in the spirit. A soft insistence of blessing, finding every edge it was meant to reach. Begin at the head each day, and let gravity do the rest. You do not have to push rivers uphill. You have to keep the source clean. And as you do, the same pattern will continue. Thoughts clarified, speech dignified, reach sanctified, steps ordered. The crown will speak, the garment will obey, and the life you live, from top to hem, will look like someone who finally believed what heaven said first. Healing was never the finish line. It was the threshold. To be restored at the head and reordered in the flow is a mercy. But heaven did not stop there. When oil touches a life, it writes a commission. The same hand that lifted you from residue now sends you into rooms that need what you carry, not as a crusader straining to prove worth, but as a steward whose very presence testifies that alignment is possible. This is the quiet paradox of consecration. You become lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter of burdens you were never built to bear, heavier with a gravity that calms storms without raising your voice. You begin to notice that the authority you once tried to manufacture through volume now arrives through nearness. People lean in because peace is speaking. Atmospheres loosen because order is standing. Doors open because your steps are no longer arguing with your name. You do not need to announce rank to be recognized by it. Heaven's markings are legible to those who need what you've been given. There is a way consecrated authority walks, and it will feel both familiar and new. Familiar, because somewhere deep you have always known that timidity was a costume you wore to make others comfortable. New, because you no longer confuse boldness with hardness or clarity with control. Your sentences lengthen in kindness and shorten in boundaries, and both are holy. Where you once defended yourself, you now discern. Where you once chased explanations, you now offer presence. Where you once absorbed rooms, you now bless them without letting them stain you. This is not distance. It is stewardship. You carry your crown like a lamp in cupped hands, not to hide it, but to honor the flame. You bless what is true, you decline what is corrosive, you forgive what was ignorant, and you keep moving because assignment has replaced approval as the compass. Commission will draw you into places that look too small for your anointing and into arenas that seem too large for your history. And you will discover the same rule in both. Oil fits. In the humble space, you will not shrink to match low ceilings. You will love in a way that raises them. In the vast space, you will not swell to fill it. You will remain anchored, letting favor do the expanding. This is how heaven trusts a life. It watches what you do with scale. The consecrated do not waste themselves proving they belong. They spend themselves serving what belongs to God. You will sit at tables where gossip is the currency and realize you are now wealthier than that economy. Your silence will bankrupt whole conversations. You will step into meetings where anxiety is the air and feel a stillness gather around your head as if a hand rested there. The room will inhale and remember how to breathe. You will enter moments of conflict and find your words arriving already rinsed, free of the grit that used to grind your throat. Truth will land like rain instead of shards, and people will receive it, because the tone carries the same oil as the content. Do not be surprised when opposition returns in subtler forms. The enemy who could not confuse your head may try to distract your hands. He will offer assignments that look holy and taste hurried, opportunities that promise reach and erode rest, platforms that elevate you while lowering your hearing. Remember what alignment taught you. The top instructs the task. If the invitation requires you to treat your crown as common, it is not promotion. It is depletion dressed as destiny. Turn with grace. Keep the gate clean. Let your yes be narrow enough to hold glory. When fatigue begins to gather like a mist, do not negotiate with it at ground level. Return to the head. Place your hand there like a priest returning to the altar and say what is true until the fog admits defeat. Commissioned people are not those who never tire. They are those who know where strength begins. And as you move, watch how God vindicates without spectacle. The narratives that once traveled ahead of you, too intense, too sensitive, too much, will be met by the life that walks in after them, and the room will quietly change its mind. You will not need to correct the record. Presence will correct it. You will not need to chase those who misread you. Assignment will introduce you again in languages they understand. Consistency, integrity, fruit. What you plant will take root faster because the soil recognizes the seed. What you carry will multiply because it is no longer diluted by apology. What you release will heal because it is delivered by a head that stays under oil. This is not a season of survival. It is a chapter of rule. Rule over your inner weather. Rule over your hours. Rule over your words. Rule over the gates God has entrusted to you. Not domination, but dominion. The kind that looks like a garden, tended until it becomes a sign. So lift your face to the future without flinching. The crown you honor will keep instructing the body you inhabit, and the story you inhabit will keep revealing the God who crowned you. Let your steps be sentences heaven is eager to read aloud. Let your work be proof that consecration is not a costume, but a structure. Let your kindness be weighty, your boundaries gentle, your pace sane, your gaze level. And when you forget, as humans do, remember where beginnings live. Begin at the head. Speak what is true. Stand under the oil. Then move again, commissioned, not just cured, carrying a quiet authority that turns corridors into corridors of peace and tasks into liturgies, until even the ordinary things you touch begin to smell like the place where your crown was anointed. Lift your head, chosen one. You are not trying to invent a new self. You are remembering a crowned one. When the top agrees with heaven, the rest of your life finds its place. Keep your gate clean, keep your words true, keep your pace sane. Begin at the head each day, and let the oil do what oil has always done. Run downward, order the flow, Soften the hard places and leave the fragrance of God wherever you pass. Walk quietly, carry holy weight, and let your presence preach what your mouth no longer needs to prove. You are consecrated, you are commissioned, and your crown is no longer casual. It is a charge.